I'm Amanda, 32 years old, and I've spent 14 years of my life serving in the military. Yet somehow, nothing prepared me for the battlefield of my sister's wedding. My parents never believed in my career choice. They thought it was just a phase, a rebellion. When I received Natalie's invitation, my stomach knotted with dread. Their dismissive comment, their disappointed looks, the constant comparison, I knew it was coming. What I didn't expect was how my sister's groom would change everything with just a salute and 7 words that silenced the room. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should believe in you most, stick around. Let me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about standing your ground when it matters most. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I always felt different from what my parents expected. My bedroom walls weren't covered with boy band posters, but with military aircraft and historic war heroes. While other girls my age were taking ballet lessons, I was begging my parents to let me join junior ROTC. Girls don't become soldiers, Amanda, my mother would say with that tight smile that never reached her eyes. They become wives, mothers, maybe teachers or nurses if they're career-minded. My father would nod along, adding his own commentary. The military is no place for women, especially not a Bennett woman. The irony was that my grandfather, my father's own father, had been a decorated Vietnam veteran. His medals sat in our living room display case. But whenever I expressed interest in following his path, those medals might as well have been invisible. Natalie, my younger sister by 3 years, was everything I wasn't in my parents' eyes. She was graceful, studious in the right subjects, and had no interest in masculine pursuits. When she announced her intention to become a lawyer, my parents threw her a party. When I announced my plan to enlist after high school, my mother cried. And my father didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. You'll wash out in basic training, he finally said when he acknowledged my decision. Then you can come home and attend community college like we discussed. But I didn't wash out. Despite the rigorous physical demands and mental challenges, I thrived. The structure, the discipline, the sense of purpose, it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. My drill sergeant noticed my leadership potential early on, and I was singled out for additional responsibilities. My first letters home were full of excitement and accomplishment. The responses were tepid at best. That's nice, dear. Natalie just made the dean's list again. Years passed. I moved up the ranks steadily, deployed 3 times, and earned commendations that my parents never asked to see. Meanwhile, Natalie graduated law school, joined a prestigious firm, and each achievement was celebrated with dinner parties and proud social media announcements. I don't blame Natalie. She was caught in the middle, and she tried in her own way to bridge the gap. She'd call me when our parents weren't around, ask genuine questions about my life, send care packages when I was deployed. But the pattern was set. I was the disappointment, she was the success story. By my 10th year of service, I had risen to the rank of lieutenant colonel, commanding my own battalion. The promotion ceremony was attended by fellow officers, subordinates who respected me, and one friend from home, Rachel, who had stuck by me since childhood. My parents sent a generic congratulations card, misspelling my rank. Rachel understood what that small slight meant to me. They don't deserve to know how amazing you are, she said as we shared drinks after the ceremony. Some people can't see beyond their own narrow worldview. Rachel was right, but it still hurt. Every achievement felt hollow without that parental pride I'd been seeking since childhood. Even as I counseled younger female recruits to find validation within themselves, I struggled to take my own advice. The real turning point in my career came during my 3rd deployment. Our unit was coordinating a complex evacuation operation in a hostile territory when communication broke down. Under heavy fire, I reorganized our forces, established new communication protocols, and led a successful extraction that saved 37 civilians and all military personnel. The decisive leadership I displayed during those critical hours earned me significant recognition and fast-tracked my next promotion. 2 years later, at 32, I became one of the youngest female major generals in military history. The promotion was recent, just 3 months before Natalie's wedding invitation arrived. It was a significant achievement that represented years of sacrifice, intelligence, and leadership. And my family had no idea. I hadn't told them. After years of dismissal, I couldn't bear another underwhelming response to something that meant everything to me. Rachel was furious when I said I wouldn't tell them. Amanda, you're a freaking 2-star general. Do you know how rare that is? How impressive. You've shattered glass ceilings and saved lives. They should be shouting it from the rooftops. They won't care, I replied, staring at the new stars on my uniform. To them, I'm still just playing soldier. Rachel shook her head. One day, they'll realize what they've been missing. And that day is going to hit them like a ton of bricks. I had no idea how prophetic her words would be. The invitation arrived while I was reviewing operations reports in my office. Cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. Classic Natalie. Inside was a formal invitation to her wedding to James Sullivan, along with a handwritten note. Amanda, I know family gatherings aren't easy for you, but it would mean the world to have my big sister by my side. James is eager to meet you. He's military too. Love you, Natalie. I stared at that note for a long time. Natalie had always been the diplomatic one, trying to keep the peace. And now she was marrying someone in the military? That was unexpected. I wondered if our parents had adjusted their views or if they were just making an exception for their beloved future son-in-law. That evening, I called Natalie. Hey sis, got your invitation today. Congratulations. Amanda, I was hoping you'd call. Please tell me you're coming. Her voice was bright with hope. I'm not sure, Nat, things with mom and dad are still. I trailed off, not knowing how to summarize years of disappointment. I know, she said, her voice softening. But things might be different now. They've mellowed a bit. And James really wants to meet you. He's Army, by the way. What rank? I asked, professional curiosity kicking in. Something senior, I think. He doesn't talk about it much. Says it's just a job, not who he is. She laughed. Sound familiar? I smiled despite myself. Maybe her fiancé and I would get along after all. So you'll come, she pressed. I'm not taking no for an answer, Amanda. It's my wedding. The guilt trip, expertly applied as only a little sister could. I need to check my schedule, but I'll try. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of previous family gatherings plagued me. Thanksgiving 2 years after I enlisted, when my father introduced me to his friends as Amanda, who's still figuring things out in the Army. My cousin's wedding, where my mother quickly changed the subject when someone asked about my career. Natalie's law school graduation, where my parents made sure I understood that this was what real achievement looked like. The next morning, I called my therapist, Dr. Marshall, for an emergency session. What's the worst that could happen if you attend? She asked after I explained the situation. They'll belittle my career choices, make me feel small. Compare me unfavorably to Natalie and her lawyer friends. And how would that be different from what they've been doing for years? I paused. I guess it wouldn't. So what are you really afraid of? The question hit me hard. That no matter what I achieve, it will never be enough for them. And I hate that I still care. Dr. Marshall leaned forward. Amanda, you've faced enemy fire. You've made life or death decisions under extreme pressure. You've earned a rank that few people, man or woman, ever achieve. Yet facing your parents still terrifies you. That's different, I protested. Is it? In both situations, you're confronting forces that seem beyond your control. The difference is that in your professional life, you've learned to trust your training, your judgment, your worth. With your parents, you're still seeking validation from people who may never be able to give it to you. She was right, and we both knew it. By the end of the session, I had decided to attend the wedding. Not for my parents, but for Natalie and for myself. It was time to face this particular battlefield with the same courage I'd shown in others. The next decision was whether to wear my uniform. Military formal dress would be appropriate for a wedding, and it would be a statement, a visual representation of everything I'd accomplished. But would it come across as showing off? Would it create more tension? Rachel was emphatic when I called her. Wear the uniform. You earned every thread of it. If they can't handle seeing their daughter as the powerful woman she is, that's their problem. I spent an entire afternoon shopping for civilian clothes for the rehearsal dinner. Something elegant but understated. For a woman who spent most of her time in uniform, the process was surprisingly stressful. I finally settled on a simple black cocktail dress that the saleswoman assured me was timeless. As the wedding date approached, I submitted my leave request, booked flights, and arranged for a rental car. Each step felt like preparing for a mission, complete with contingency plans. If things got too uncomfortable, I had reserved a hotel room rather than staying at my parents' house. I had Rachel on standby for emergency pep talks. I even prepared neutral conversation topics to deflect personal questions. The night before my flight, I stood in front of my closet, looking at my formal dress uniform. The stars on the shoulder boards caught the light. Major General Amanda Bennett. I had earned this. Whatever happened at the wedding, no one could take that away from me. The flight to Boston was smooth, but my nerves were anything but. As the taxi pulled up to the hotel, I found myself mentally reviewing exit strategies like I was entering hostile territory. In a way I was. Natalie had texted that she'd meet me in the hotel lobby before the rehearsal dinner. When I spotted her, my heart swelled. Despite our different paths, she was still my little sister, and seeing her radiant with pre-wedding happiness momentarily pushed aside my anxiety. Amanda! She rushed over, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of expensive perfume. You look amazing. Military life clearly agrees with you. I returned her embrace, genuinely happy to see her. You're the one who looks amazing. Bride-to-be glow is real. For a few precious minutes, it was just us trading stories, laughing, reconnecting. Then she glanced at her watch. We should head to the restaurant. Everyone's excited to see you. I doubted that very much, but I smiled and followed her out. The private dining room at Giovanni's was filled with familiar faces, extended family, old neighbors, and front and center my parents. My mother spotted me first, her smile freezing slightly before she composed herself and approached. Amanda, you're here. She air-kissed near my cheek, careful not to actually make contact. You cut your hair even shorter. Not, it's good to see you, or how was your flight, but criticism within 10 seconds. Right on schedule. My father came over, giving me a brief, awkward pat on the shoulder. Amanda. Glad you could take time off from your work. The pause was subtle but deliberate. In 14 years, he had never once referred to my military service as a career. Wouldn't miss Natalie's big day, I replied, forcing brightness into my voice. Come meet James, Natalie said, sensing the tension and steering me toward a tall man in conversation with what appeared to be his parents. As we approached, something about his posture struck me as familiar. When he turned, there was a moment of mutual assessment before he smiled warmly. You must be the famous sister, James Sullivan. He extended his hand, and his handshake was firm, professional. Amanda Bennett. Congratulations on landing this one. I nodded toward Natalie. She's always been the catch of the family. I disagree, he said with a curious look. From what Natalie's told me, both Bennett sisters are exceptional. There was something in his eyes, a recognition maybe? But before I could place it, my mother swooped in to guide James toward people he simply must meet. The dinner proceeded as I'd feared. My parents paraded Natalie and James around the room, introducing them to everyone with effusive pride. When guests asked about me, my mother would quickly say, Amanda's in the military, before changing the subject. During the salad course, my father held court at our table, loudly discussing my cousin's promotion at a Boston investment firm. That's the kind of career that builds something, he announced to the table. Security, respect, a future. His eyes flicked to me briefly, the implication clear. Unlike what I was doing. Speaking of careers, an elderly aunt interjected, What exactly do you do in the army, Amanda? Are you still a lieutenant? Before I could answer, my mother laughed lightly. Oh, Aunt Margaret. Those military ranks are so confusing. Amanda does something administrative, don't you, dear? I began, but was interrupted by my father raising his glass. A toast to our Natalie and her brilliant choice of partner. James, we couldn't be prouder to welcome you to the family. As glasses were raised, I noticed James watching me from across the table. His expression thoughtful. When the toast ended, he excused himself and made his way to the empty seat beside me. Your sister tells me you've been serving for 14 years. He said without preamble. That's right. Where were you stationed during Operation Eastern Shield? The question surprised me. It was a specific operation from 3 years ago. Not something civilians typically knew about. Al Merritt Forward Base, I replied cautiously. A flash of recognition crossed his face. I thought so. 3rd Division. You were there. He nodded. Different sector. It was a tough deployment. For the first time that evening, I felt myself relax slightly. Very. But we got the job done. That you did. He said with what seemed like professional respect. Our conversation was interrupted by my mother calling James away to meet more guests. As he left, he gave me a nod that felt like solidarity. The rest of the evening dragged on, a parade of subtle digs and pointed exclusions. By the time I escaped to my hotel room, I was emotionally exhausted. I kicked off my heels and called Rachel. "How bad?" she asked immediately. "Scale of 1 to 10? A solid 7 with potential to escalate tomorrow. Did you tell them about your promotion?" No opportunity between all the passive-aggressive comments. I sighed, falling back onto the bed. Why am I even here, Rachel? They don't want me here. They just want to showcase Natalie's perfect life. You're there because you're stronger than they know. And because someday they'll regret every moment they didn't celebrate you. Rachel's voice was fierce with loyalty. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow, you're putting on that uniform and showing them exactly who Major General Bennett is. After we hung up, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was making a mistake. Maybe I should just wear a simple dress tomorrow, blend in, get through it. But Rachel was right. I had spent too many years dimming my light around my family. Tomorrow, for better or worse, they would see me as I truly was. Morning arrived with weak sunshine filtering through hotel curtains. I woke before my alarm, years of military routine ingrained in my body. For a moment, I lay still, mentally preparing for the day ahead as if it were a mission briefing. Objective: support Natalie on her wedding day. Secondary objective: maintain dignity regardless of parents' behavior. Potential obstacles: family criticism, social discomfort, emotional triggers. Equipment: formal military dress uniform. I rose and began my preparation methodically. Shower, hairstyled precisely to regulation, minimal makeup. Then came the uniform, each piece donned with practiced precision. The dark blue jacket with its gold buttons and trim. The matching skirt, perfectly pressed. The white shirt, crisp and immaculate. The black Oxfords polished to a mirror shine. Finally, I affixed the rank insignia. The 2 silver stars that represented countless hours of work, sacrifice, and leadership. I stood before the mirror, adjusting my hat to the exact angle required by regulations. The woman who looked back at me wasn't just Amanda Bennett, the disappointing daughter. She was Major General Bennett, one of the youngest women to achieve this rank in military history. Someone who commanded respect from thousands of troops. Someone who had earned every ribbon and medal displayed on her chest. As I gathered my small clutch and room key, my phone chimed with a text from Natalie. "Can't wait to see you. Wedding party is meeting at 1 p.m. LOL. James' military talk is rubbing off on me." I smiled. If she thought James' occasional military jargon was notable, she had no idea what was coming. The venue was a historic estate with manicured gardens and a grand ballroom. As my rental car crunched up the gravel drive, I spotted groups of well-dressed guests already arriving. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car, standing tall in my full uniform. The reaction was immediate. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Several male guests who I later learned were veterans straightened instinctively before catching themselves. I made my way toward the building, nodding politely to guests who stared. Near the entrance, I spotted my mother in a lavender mother-of-the-bride dress, greeting arrivals. When she saw me, her smile faltered. "Amanda, I thought we discussed wearing something appropriate." Her whisper was harsh, her eyes darting around to see who was watching. "This is appropriate, Mom. Military formal dress is perfectly suitable for a wedding. You know what I mean. This isn't the time to make a statement. Today is about Natalie. I'm not making a statement. This is who I am." Before she could respond, my father appeared at her side, his face flushing at the sight of me. "For God's sake, Amanda. Did you have to come in costume?" "Costume? 14 years of service reduced to playing dress-up. This is my formal uniform, Dad. It's what military personnel wear to formal events." He shook his head. "You're embarrassing us. Johnson from the club is here with his wife, and the Prestons, and Judge Calloway. What are they going to think?" "Hopefully that your daughter serves her country with honor," I replied, my voice level despite the anger building inside. My mother gripped my arm, steering me toward a side entrance. "Just try not to draw attention to yourself, please. Go find your seat in the ceremony. You're on the bride's side, 4th row." "4th row? I'm the bride's sister. The first rows are for immediate family and very close friends," my father explained with faux patience. "I am immediate family. You know what we mean, Amanda. Don't make a scene." I bit back the response I wanted to give and instead nodded stiffly, moving past them into the venue. As I walked through the gathering guests, I overheard snippets of conversation. That's the sister, I think. Military, apparently. Career military. Such an unusual choice for a woman from that family. I found my assigned seat, indeed in the fourth row, behind cousins I barely knew and my mother's college roommate. Clearly, I had been deliberately placed where I would be less visible. As I sat, an elderly woman I recognized as my grandmother's sister took the seat beside me. Amanda, dear. My goodness, don't you look impressive? Aunt Eleanor's eyes were kind as they took in my uniform. Your grandfather would have been so proud. The simple statement nearly broke my composure. Thank you, Aunt Eleanor. That means a lot. Those are stars on your shoulders, aren't they? What does that mean? It means she couldn't hack it in the real world, came my mother's voice as she approached, smile fixed firmly in place. Amanda. The photographer wants family shots before the ceremony. Please come this way. I excused myself and followed her to a garden terrace where a photographer was arranging people for formal portraits. We'll do parents with the bride first, the photographer announced, positioning my parents on either side of a radiant Natalie in her wedding gown. After several configurations of shots with various relatives, the photographer said, now just the sisters together. Natalie beamed as I stood beside her. You look amazing, sis. So official. You're the one who looks amazing, I replied honestly. James is a lucky man. As the photographer snapped our photo, my mother leaned toward my father, whispering not quite softly enough. We'll need to make sure they do some shots with Amanda in normal clothes later. I pretended not to hear, but Natalie frowned. Before she could say anything, the wedding coordinator appeared, announcing it was nearly time for the ceremony. As guests were seated and the wedding party assembled, I returned to my fourth row seat, increasingly aware of the stares and whispers. Part of me wanted to slip away, to spare Natalie any drama on her day. But another part, the part that had faced down enemy fire and impossible odds, refused to retreat. The ceremony music began, and the procession started. James appeared at the altar, and I felt a jolt of surprise. He too was in full military dress uniform, army, with insignia indicating a high rank. The cut and decorations of his uniform suggested significant service and seniority, though from my distance I couldn't make out the specific rank. As Natalie walked down the aisle on our father's arm, looking blissfully happy, I pushed aside my hurt feelings. This day was about her happiness, whatever my parents thought of me. I just didn't realize how dramatically things were about to change. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Natalie and James exchanged personally written vows that spoke of partnership, respect, and building a life together. Despite my emotional turmoil, I found myself moved by their obvious devotion to each other. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the ballroom erupted in applause. I clapped until my hands hurt, genuinely happy for my sister, momentarily forgetting the tension with my parents. That peace was short-lived. As guests moved to the adjacent reception hall for cocktails while the wedding party took more photos, I found myself cornered by my father's golf buddies. So Army, huh? One of them asked, swirling his scotch. My nephew did a stint. Got out after 4 years, got himself a real job in finance. I'm career military, I replied evenly. 14 years so far. Good for you. His wife said with patronizing brightness. It's so important for girls to try different things before settling down. Before I could respond, another man joined the circle. Bennett. Your daughter here is quite the conversation piece. Didn't know you had a military kid. My father laughed uncomfortably. Well, Amanda's always been unconventional. We had hoped she'd follow Natalie into law or perhaps medicine, but he trailed off with a shrug that conveyed volumes of disappointment. Still time to start a proper career, the first man said with a wink. I excused myself before I said something I'd regret. Finding a quiet corner, I took deep breaths, reminding myself why I was here. For Natalie. I could endure a few hours of this. The photographer summoned all family members for group photos, and I took my place beside cousins and aunts. As we arranged ourselves, my mother stage whispered to me, Amanda, maybe you could remove your hat for these? It's casting shadows. It's part of the uniform, Mom. Protocol requires. Oh, for heaven's sake. It's just a family photo, not a military inspection. She turned to the photographer. Can you put her in the back row? The uniform is rather distracting. Several relatives looked away uncomfortably. Natalie, from her central position, shot me an apologetic glance. The reception followed, with assigned seating that placed me at a table far from the wedding party, with distant relatives and family friends I barely knew. I made polite conversation, deflecting questions about my unusual career choice with practiced ease. During the first course, I noticed James making his rounds, thanking guests for coming. His approach to hosting was methodical, much like a military operation, efficient coverage of territory, appropriate time allocation for each conversation. When he reached our table, he greeted each person warmly. When he came to me, something in his manner changed subtly. "Amanda, I hope you're enjoying yourself despite being placed at Siberia." He nodded toward my distance from the main table. "I'm fine, James. Congratulations again. The ceremony was beautiful." "Thank you." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Your sister has told me a lot about family dynamics. I want you to know you're welcome in our family, rank and all." There was something knowing in his expression that I couldn't quite place. Before I could respond, my mother appeared, linking her arm through his. "James, darling, the Whitfields are simply dying to hear about your work with international clients." She led him away, throwing a warning glance over her shoulder at me. After dinner came the traditional speeches. The best man told appropriate but funny stories about James. The maid of honor praised Natalie's kindness and intelligence. Then my father stood, champagne glass in hand. When my little girl told me she was marrying a military man, I'll admit I was concerned. He began, earning chuckles from the crowd. But then I met James, Harvard Law before his service, plans to join Bennett and Associates after his final tour. A man with a real future. The implication was clear, and several heads turned toward me. I kept my expression neutral through years of practice masking emotions in difficult situations. To Natalie and James, my father concluded, the perfect match. Both brilliant, both destined for greatness in the real world. Applause followed as my mother stood to add her own thoughts. I always knew Natalie would choose someone special, someone accomplished. James isn't just a soldier, he has ambition, plans, direction. Each word was a carefully placed barb, designed to highlight the contrast with her other daughter. I sat rigid in my chair, knuckles white around my water glass. When the speeches concluded and the dance floor opened, I decided I needed air. As I made my way toward the terrace doors, my mother intercepted me. "There you are. Several people have commented on your outfit." Her voice was hushed but sharp. "Couldn't you have worn something less attention-seeking? This is Natalie's day, not a military parade. This is standard formal dress, Mom." "Well, it's embarrassing. The Richardson's daughter is a surgeon and she managed to wear a normal dress. Even James changed into a tuxedo for the reception." I glanced toward the dance floor, where James was indeed now wearing formal evening wear as he danced with Natalie. "I'm sorry you're embarrassed by my service," I said quietly. "Don't be dramatic, Amanda. We're not embarrassed by your hobby. We just wish you'd make an effort to fit in with normal society occasionally." Hobby. The word hit like a physical blow. I command thousands of troops. I've led combat operations. People have died following my orders, and others have lived because of them. It's not a hobby. She waved dismissively. Yes. I'm sure it all seems very important in that world. But look around, Amanda. This is the real world. Successful people, professional people. People with futures. My father joined us, face flushed from champagne and dancing. "There's my girls. Catherine, they're about to cut the cake. Your daughter thinks we're embarrassed by her playing soldier," my mother informed him. "Not now, Amanda." My father's jovial expression hardened. "This is your sister's wedding. Can you, for once, not make everything about your lifestyle choice?" "Lifestyle choice? Dad. It's my career. My calling. Career." He scoffed loudly enough that nearby guests turned to look. "Real careers build something, Amanda. They don't just march around in fancy costumes playing war games." The nearby conversations halted. A circle of silence spread around us as guests pretended not to listen. "That fancy costume represents my service to this country," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Something our family used to value. If Grandpa's medals in your living room mean anything, don't you dare compare yourself to him," my father hissed. He served because he had to, then came home and built a real life. You're hiding from real life. The hurt was so acute I could barely breathe. 14 years of service, of sacrifice, of achievement, all dismissed as hiding, as playing pretend. I think it would be best if you changed before the family photos, my mother added, oblivious to my pain. We brought a nice dress for you, just in case. It's in the bridal suite. That was the final straw. I had faced discrimination, sexism, and danger throughout my military career, but nothing cut as deeply as my own parents' dismissal. I won't be changing, I said. My voice now commander steady. And I think it's time for me to leave. Don't be ridiculous, my mother hissed. You can't just leave your sister's wedding. I'm sure my absence won't be noticed from the fourth row. As I turned to go, I caught sight of James watching our interaction from across the room. Something in his expression changed. A decision being made. He whispered something to Natalie, then began making his way toward us with purpose in his stride. I had no idea that the next few minutes would change everything. James reached our small group just as I was preparing to walk away. The tension must have been visible, as several nearby guests were watching with poorly disguised interest. Is everything all right over here? He asked, his voice pleasant but carrying a note of authority that made my parents straighten instinctively. Just a family discussion, my father replied, attempting to regain his celebratory demeanor. Nothing to concern yourself with on your big day, son. James nodded, then turned to me. Amanda, I've been hoping to catch you properly. There's something I've been meaning to address. James, darling, my mother interjected. They're about to announce the cake cutting. This can wait, surely. He smiled at her politely. This will just take a moment, Catherine. There was something in his tone that brooked no argument, and my mother fell silent, looking confused. James turned back to me, and his posture subtly shifted. His spine straightened, shoulders squared, chin lifted slightly. I recognized the change immediately. It was the physical transformation that occurs when a military member moves from casual to formal stance. Then, in one fluid motion, James Sullivan, my sister's new husband, stood at attention and rendered a perfect regulation salute. Major General Bennett, ma'am. It's an honor to have you at our wedding. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. No one moved to clean it up. All eyes were fixed on the tableau before them, James at attention, saluting me with perfect military precision. I returned the salute automatically, training overriding shock. At ease. Colonel Sullivan, I responded, recognizing his rank insignia from the ceremony. James relaxed his posture but remained formal. I apologize for not acknowledging your rank earlier, ma'am. Natalie mentioned you were military but didn't specify your position. My father found his voice first. What did you call her? James turned to him, expression professionally neutral. Major General Bennett, sir. Your daughter is a 2-star general in the United States Army. One of the youngest female officers to achieve that rank in military history. The murmurs started immediately, rippling through the reception hall like a wave. That's not possible, my mother said faintly. Amanda does something administrative. James raised an eyebrow. With respect, Mrs. Bennett, your daughter commands the 4th Division, overseeing approximately 20,000 personnel. Her leadership during Operation Eastern Shield saved countless lives, both military and civilian. Her strategic innovations have been adopted as standard protocol in multiple theaters of operation. He turned, addressing the gathered guests who had abandoned all pretense of not listening. For those unfamiliar with military structure, achieving the rank of Major General typically takes decades. General Bennett has accomplished it in 14 years. Through exceptional service and leadership abilities that I've personally witnessed in the field. A silver-haired man stepped forward to Judge Calloway, whom my father had been so concerned about impressing. Bennett, he said slowly, your daughter is a 2-star general? And you never mentioned it. My father opened and closed his mouth, speechless for perhaps the first time in his life. Another guest, a woman in her 60s, approached me directly. General, my son served in Eastern Shield. He came home safely because of the evacuation protocols your team implemented. I had no idea you were Robert's daughter. James nodded. General Bennett's extraction strategy during that operation is now taught at West Point as a case study in crisis leadership. I was coordinating adjacent operations and witnessed firsthand how her quick thinking prevented what could have been a massacre. More guests were gathering now, including several who identified themselves as veterans or military family members. One by one, they approached, some offering handshakes, others rendering respectful salutes. My parents stood frozen, watching as their social circle regarded me with growing admiration and respect. Natalie appeared at James's side, her expression a mix of confusion and dawning realization. "Amanda, you're a general? A real general?" I nodded, throat tight with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, hurt evident in her voice. "Because it never mattered to them," I answered softly, nodding toward our parents. And I was tired of having my achievements dismissed. James placed a hand on Natalie's shoulder. "Your sister is being modest. The security clearance level required for her position means much of her work can't be discussed publicly. But in military circles, the Bennett name carries significant weight." My mother had gone pale. All this time, we thought. That I was playing soldier? I finished for her. That I was hiding from the real world? My father seemed to age before my eyes, the realization of his years of dismissal finally hitting home. Judge Calloway clapped him on the shoulder, perhaps harder than necessary. "Robert, you never told us the military tradition in your family continued so impressively. A 2-star general. That puts your daughter at the Pentagon level of leadership, doesn't it?" James nodded. "Yes, sir. General Bennett reports directly to the Joint Chiefs on certain matters. Her security clearance is among the highest in the military." The judge shook his head in amazement. "And here you've been bragging about Natalie making partner at your firm. No offense to the bride," he added quickly, nodding to my sister. "None taken," Natalie replied, still staring at me with new eyes. "I had no idea, Amanda. I mean, I knew you were doing well, but a general? That's incredible." More guests approached, asking questions about my service, my role, my achievements. For the first time in my adult life, I saw genuine interest in my parents' social circle as they realized who I actually was. Not the daughter playing soldier, but a highly respected military leader. Throughout it all, my parents remained largely silent, the magnitude of their misjudgment rendering them uncharacteristically speechless. I caught my mother wiping away tears at one point, though whether from embarrassment or belated pride, I couldn't tell. As the initial excitement subsided and guests returned to the celebration, James approached me privately. "I hope I didn't overstep, ma'am," he said quietly. "But Natalie has told me stories about family gatherings, and when I realized who you were..." He shrugged. Some things needed to be said. "Thank you, Colonel," I replied, genuine gratitude in my voice. "Though I suspect my parents won't be thanking you for the revelation. With respect, General. Their opinion on this particular matter isn't my primary concern." His eyes flicked to Natalie, who was watching us from across the room. "Your sister has always admired you, you know. She just didn't understand the magnitude of what you've accomplished because they never allowed her to." The truth of his words hit home. Natalie had been as much a victim of our parents' narrow worldview as I had been, just in a different way. She had been placed on a pedestal but never allowed to see beyond its limited height. As the band announced the next dance, James offered a parting comment. "For what it's worth, General, your reputation preceded you long before we met today. The Bennett extraction strategy saved a lot of good people, including friends of mine." He nodded respectfully and returned to his bride. I stood there, processing the dramatic shift in the room's energy. For the first time in a family gathering, I wasn't being treated as the disappointing daughter, the black sheep, the one who couldn't hack it in the real world. Instead, I was being acknowledged as exactly what I was, a leader, a strategist, a woman who had earned her place at the highest levels of military command. And all it had taken was 7 words and a salute from someone my parents actually respected. The remainder of the reception unfolded like an alternate reality. Guests who had previously avoided eye contact now approached eagerly. My mother's friends who had earlier offered condescending comments about my unusual job now wanted introductions to their grandchildren considering military service. My father's business associates suddenly discovered urgent questions about defense contracts and security protocols. Through it all, I maintained the poise and presence that had become second nature in my professional life. I answered appropriate questions, deflected classified ones, and tried to redirect attention back to the bride and groom where it belonged. Natalie found me during a quiet moment by the dessert table. "I feel like the worst sister in the world," she said without preamble. All these years and I had no idea what you were really doing. It's not your fault, Nat. But it is. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed back when Mom and Dad dismissed your career. I believed them when they said you were stuck in some administrative position. I took her hand. You were a kid when I enlisted. By the time you were old enough to understand, the pattern was set. And I stopped talking about my work because it was easier than dealing with their reactions. James knew, she said, glancing toward her new husband, who was chatting with guests across the room. Not specifically about you. He didn't make the connection until today, but he always corrected Mom and Dad when they made dismissive comments about military service. I should have done the same. He seems like a good man, I offered. He is. She squeezed my hand. And he respects you enormously, I can tell. Not just the rank, but what you've accomplished. She shook her head. Amazement still evident in her expression. My big sister, the general. It's going to take some getting used to. I'm still just Amanda, I reminded her. No, she said firmly. You're not just anything. And I'm sorry I ever let anyone make you feel that way. We hugged then. A real hug free of the tension that had characterized our interactions for years. When we separated, I noticed our parents watching us from across the room. Uncertainty plain on their faces. I should go check on the cake situation, Natalie said, following my gaze. But Amanda? I'm really proud of you. I always have been, even when I didn't understand exactly what I should be proud of. As she moved away, my parents approached cautiously. Like civilians entering an unknown territory. Which in a way they were. The daughter they thought they knew had been revealed as someone else entirely. Amanda, my mother began. Her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Perhaps we could speak privately? I nodded and we moved to a quiet corner of the terrace. The night air was cool. A welcome relief from the reception's warmth and intensity. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my father cleared his throat. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. A note of accusation still present despite everything. Would it have mattered? I countered. When I made captain, I called to tell you. Mom said. That's nice. Dear, and changed the subject to Natalie's internship. When I was promoted to major, Dad asked when I was going to get a real job, like my cousin Brian. My mother flinched. We didn't understand the significance. You never tried to, I said simply. Military service wasn't valued in our household, despite Grandpa's medals collecting dust in your display case. It wasn't the path you chose for me, so it wasn't worth acknowledging. That's not fair, my father protested, but weakly. Isn't it? Tonight. You publicly dismissed 14 years of my life as playing soldier and wearing a costume. You've consistently referred to my career as a hobby or a phase. Why would I share my achievements with people who fundamentally don't respect what I do? My mother dabbed at her eyes with a cocktail napkin. We were worried about you. The danger, the deployments. The lifestyle, it's not what we wanted for our daughter. I know, I said, softening slightly. You wanted me to be safe, secure, close to home. But that wasn't my path. It never was. Major General, my father said slowly as if testing the words. That's significant, isn't it? Yes, Dad. Very few women have achieved this rank and fewer still at my age. He nodded. Absorbing this. And James, he's your subordinate? I shook my head. Different command structure. But we've worked in adjacent operations. His respect is professional. Not just a courtesy to Natalie's sister. A flash of something crossed my father's face, pride, perhaps, or at least the beginning of understanding. All those deployments, those years overseas. My mother said, you were actually in charge? Making decisions? Yes, Mom. Critical ones, often under extreme pressure. Lives depended on those decisions. She reached for my hand tentatively. That must have been terribly difficult. It was the first time either of them had acknowledged the weight of my responsibilities rather than dismissing them. Something tight in my chest began to loosen just slightly. It was. Still is. But it's also meaningful work. Important work. My father straightened his shoulders. Well, I suppose we owe you an apology. It wasn't exactly heartfelt, but from a man who rarely admitted error, it was significant. I would appreciate that, I said quietly. We're sorry, Amanda. My mother offered. We should have listened better. Tried harder to understand. We were wrong, my father added, the words clearly difficult for him. About your career. About what you've accomplished. I nodded, accepting their words without rushing to absolve them. Thank you. That means something to me. An uncomfortable silence fell. 14 years of misunderstanding and hurt too complex to resolve in one conversation. So my father finally said, attempting normalcy. The Pentagon, eh? That must be interesting work. It was a small thing, this awkward attempt at genuine interest, but it was a beginning. Parts of it are, I replied. Other parts are bureaucracy and paperwork, like any job. Perhaps. My mother ventured, when things settled down after the wedding, you could tell us more about it? What you're allowed to share, of course. I'd like that, I said, meaning it. We rejoined the reception, the air between us different, not healed, not yet, but changed. The damage of years wouldn't be undone in a night, but a door had opened that had long been closed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of cake, dancing, and the traditional send-off for the bride and groom. As Natalie and James prepared to leave for their honeymoon, my sister pulled me into a fierce hug. Promise you'll come visit us when we're back? James said he can get you access to the base. I'd like that, I replied, returning her embrace. And Amanda? Thank you for coming today. It wouldn't have been right without you. After they departed amid a shower of rose petals, I said my goodbyes to extended family and prepared to return to my hotel. My parents walked me to my car, the silence between us now contemplative rather than strained. Will you come to breakfast tomorrow? My mother asked. Before you fly back? The family is gathering at the house. I considered the invitation, weighing old hurts against potential new beginnings. Yes, I decided. I'd like that. My father nodded, then asked hesitantly, would it be appropriate to see some of your medals sometime? If you have them with you. They're at home, I replied. But I could bring them next time I visit. Next time, he repeated. As if the concept of regular visits was a new idea. Good. That would be good. We parted with awkward half-hugs, a family navigating unfamiliar territory but trying at least to find new paths forward. 2 weeks later, I was back at my post reviewing operational reports in my office when a package arrived from Natalie. Inside was a framed photo from the wedding, not one of the formal family portraits, but a candid shot captured during the reception. In it, James was mid-salute, my parents were wide-eyed with shock, and I was standing tall in my uniform, finally seen for who I truly was. Natalie's note read, "Thought you might appreciate this moment being preserved for posterity. James says to tell you he's still getting grief from Dad for the dramatic revelation, but Mom has your official portrait prominently displayed in the living room now, right next to Grandpa's medals. Progress, right? Love you, General Sister. Nat." I placed the photo on my desk, a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles we fight aren't on foreign soil but around family dinner tables. And that even the most entrenched positions can shift, given time and truth. The healing process with my parents would be long and imperfect. Old habits and expectations wouldn't disappear overnight. But something fundamental had changed at that wedding, not just how they saw me, but how I saw myself in relation to them. For years I had unconsciously measured my worth by their approval. An approval that never came. Now I was finally free of that need. My value, my achievements, my path, they were real and significant, regardless of whether my parents fully understood them. And that realization was perhaps the greatest victory of all. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family who couldn't see your true worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the people closest to us are the last to recognize our achievements, but that doesn't make them any less meaningful. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, your path is valid even when others don't understand it. Thank you for listening. And may you always have the courage to wear your own uniform proudly, whatever it may be.